In class today, we discussed making a very simple simulation of a paddle ball. And it's just a simple little paddle with a ball attached with a elastic cord, and you try to keep it bouncing. And we're going to create a very simple simulation of that using Unity, and the version I'm using is Unity 2019.4.13. When you look at this, the size of the game area is going to be determined by how wide your screen is, how wide you have made your Unity screen. So if yours doesn't match mine exactly, that's fine. It does not have to be the same size. All right, so in my scene, one of the things I need to do is let's work with the paddle. Okay, so going to create a 2D physics material. Nah, I'm going to create a sprite. Let's go get a sprite. Okay, and in this sprite for the paddle, we'll start with the square and then just stretch it out. Okay, there's our square. I'm going to go ahead and rename it paddle. Okay, now then I want paddle up in the game, so I'll just drag it up in there. Notice that it appears over here in our hierarchy, and our inspector gives us all the information we have about it. And what I want to do is change its size. So I want to stretch that little thing, and right up here, make sure you have the correct button selected. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, and there we go. Now that's going to move it, I believe. Let's see. There we go. Okay, that's going to stretch it out. It's not stretching it out very fine, but it'll do. Another way we can do it other than working with these and with that particular button, you can come over here to scale, and I'm going to make the scale about 5. And let's go a little bit bigger than that. Let's make the scale about 9. That'll work. Okay, and then we're going to change the Y on this to be a 0.5, and now it starts to look more like a paddle. Okay, and if I want to move it around, I can use the move button, and that will let me move it wherever I want to in this. And I want it just pretty much -9 over here, get it over to the side, and Y is 0. And of course, we're in 2D, so the Z's do not matter in this case. All right, so I have my paddle out there. Now then, the next thing I want to add to this is the little ball. And so I'll come back into Assets, right-click. We will create another sprite, and this sprite's going to be a circle. And while I have it in here, I'm going to rename that to ball. Okay, then I'm going to take and place a ball into the game, and I've got it about right there. Notice the inspector shows up as soon as this ball is selected in hierarchy. Let's see, move it around. I think I'm okay with where it is, and I like the size of it just fine. All right, and if I play the game right now, nothing happens because I have not told it to do anything. I haven't given it any abilities. But let's take a look. This is what it's going to look like in our game. And again, I don't need any of this part of the screen over, but it's there. So anyway, I'll go ahead and click on play. And it starts to play and does absolutely nothing. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to stop that. And the way mine is, notice it got trimmed off a little bit over here. So I'm going to move everything a little bit better over to the center for me. So I'll select the ball, and I'll select the move. Oh, I'm still in game. I need to go into scene. Okay, so I'm going to move ball over to about here. Then I'll select paddle, and the same thing, I'll move it over to about here. So this, notice, automatically changes the positions for X and Y. I still have it 0 on the Y, but this time it's okay. I've moved it over so I can see it a little bit better, and that's all I've accomplished so far on this. Now then, what I want to do is try to add some kind of basic physics to this, and I'm going to use the Unity physics engine for this. So let me select ball, and I'm going to get to the physics by adding a component, and make sure I've selected ball in hierarchy. I'm looking at the inspector for ball, and I'm going to add a component. Okay, and on this one I need to do a rigid body 2D. And when I do that, gives it something of, instead of just being a ghost, it actually has a physical shell on it now. And if I take a look, the mass is 1, gravity scale is 1. We are simulating gravity with this. Okay, so I'll go ahead now and run this game again and see what happens now. And the ball does respond to physics, but it passed right through the paddle. The reason being, the paddle is just essentially a ghost. It has no shell of any kind on it. So I need to come back and do the same thing, add a shell to the paddle. So stop this, make sure I'm back in scene, go to paddle, and then under paddle, I will add a component in the inspector. And again, I need a rigid body 2D. And it's set up the same way, mass and gravity scale. If I go back now and play this, well, the paddle falls just like the ball did. And that's not what I want. I want the paddle to stay still. All right, so I can keep the mass, which lets the paddle exist in there, in that digital world, but I can change the gravity on it to 0. And when I do that, if I come back and play again, okay, the paddle holds still, the ball falls, but the ball still falls right through the paddle. Okay, so let's see what we can do about that. For one thing, in our digital world, if we want things to collide, we have to give them ability to know that they've run into something else. So on the paddle, let's see, I've got the rigid body there, and everything on that's going okay. I'm going to minimize that so I can see a little bit better. Okay. Now then, to my rigid body, I'm going to add a component. And the component I'm going to add is a collider. So I start typing in collider, and it goes and finds it. Okay, for the paddle, a collider is going to surround the object and let you know when something touches the edge. So you have to decide what's going to be the best shape. Well, the paddle is nothing more than a box. So I'm going to use a box, and I've got to select 2D on this because I'm working 2D. All right. So I now have a box collider. Let's take a look at what it's got. Okay. Doesn't have any kind of material on it. Is trigger. We don't have to worry about that. And so we've done that for paddle. We need to add a collider also for the ball. So I'll select ball. I have a rigid body already. I need to add a collider. So but I don't want a box collider. Capsule, circle, that would work very well. So a circle collider. Okay, and it's the same way. Now I have a collider on the ball, a collider on the paddle. Let's go see what that does. Oh, okay. Well, it was going good for a minute, and then the ball hit the paddle and took it down with it. So they do know they have collided, but I don't want the paddle to keep going. Okay, so let me stop the game. And I need to do something with the paddle so that it doesn't just drop down. I want to pin it to this location, all right? And so I can do that with hinges. So, okay, I'm in paddle. Make sure I have selected paddle. I come over to inspector. Okay, I've added a rigid body 2D. I've added a box collider. Well, let's go through and add on this. And what I need is a hinge joint 2D. Okay, so now then I have a hinge joint 2D. And let me see what it's showing me in through here. All right, once I select this in Inspector, once I select Hinge Joint 2D in Inspector, notice it's showing me that the pin is right in the middle of the paddle, okay? And down here I'm at 0 and 0, but no, 0 and 0 is over here just a little bit, so what is this? Well, this is not talking about the world's 0, 0, which is, it's right in the middle in there, okay? What it is talking about is for the paddle from left to right, and the paddle center is 0, 0. And I don't quite want it there because that's not what how the paddle behaves. It's more along the lines of the paddle being over here to the side, okay? So I'm going to take this anchor point. Y is fine where it is, but I want X to move that way, and to move to the left is going to be a negative. Let me just give it a -3. Ooh, way too much, okay? So -3 is not right. So let's come back and try -1. That's still too far. Back up. Okay, let's try a -0.5 on this. Just a bit too much. Okay, and so I'll try a -0.4. That looks about right. Let the paddle hinge at that particular point. Now, one thing to be aware of, depending upon how large your screen is, how your original width and height on all of this, these units may measure differently for you than they do me. You might do -4 and it just barely ooches. So play with this until on yours it looks like you've got the paddle about right there. Okay, so let's go see what we've done so far. Play. And there we go. Except the paddle's going around in circles. I don't want the paddle to go around in circles. Okay, so let's go back and look and see what possibly has caused that. And that's what the green circle represents. The green circle tells you how far the paddle can go before it runs into its limit. Well, right now it has no limit. So I want to change that just a little bit. What I want to do is limit how far this can move. So I need to use limits, okay, and lower angle 0. So, okay, 0 is where it starts. And let's just try some values here and see which way they go. Hey, okay, and if I came in here and put like 270, all right, so the paddle would swing up to that far before it stopped, okay? Well, just, you know, for a regular paddle, I want it down, you know, an angle about like that, which was where I started, which is 30, okay? So let me go back now, play this, see what it looks like. Yeah, okay, that's doing okay, except after the paddle goes down, I want it to come back up, all right? Well, we can fix that too. And we're still in paddle, still in inspector, and now then we can make use of the motor, okay? The motor, and you have to play with these numbers to see if it looks right. Let's change the motor speed to, I don't know, 5, and let's go take a look now. Okay, well, all right, there's a motor that will bring this back up to 0, but the motor only has so much oomph to it. And right now the paddle is so heavy that it's overriding the ability of the motor. So let's go back and look at this again then. And under motor, well, this goes, let's try knocking that down, okay? Let's take that down to 100, try it again. Still didn't bring it back up, okay? So let's see, well, take a look at this, that's positive. Positive means to push clockwise. So it comes down to 30 and keeps pushing against the 30, trying to go further. All right, well, let's try doing a -5 then and see what happens. and that'll keep trying to push it back up to its starting location. Oops, nearly got negative 55 in there. Okay, let's go see what this looks like. Okay, now it's coming back, but it's coming back very slowly. Okay, so let's move that 5 up to negative 5 up to about negative 50. See what that does to it. Yeah, I could live with that. So you have to decide if that looks realistic enough for you. If not, we can speed it up even more. I can take that to be negative 75 and it'll go a little bit quicker. Okay, I think I'll live with that one. That one's looking pretty good. Okay, so stop that. We now have everything is looking pretty good, except for the fact the ball didn't bounce. Okay, the ball did not bounce. Let's play that again and look. See, the ball's not bouncing at all. Okay, so we need to change the characteristics of the ball so it becomes bouncy. So let's go into ball, and the material on it is just doesn't exist. So we need to come up with something we can put on this and make it a little more bouncy. Let's see, we've got the collider, we've got the rigid body 2D, and so we've got 2 or 3 places we can place this, and we'll just go give it a try. Now, to get this to be bouncy, I'm going to come back into Assets and right-click, and I'm going to create physics material, 2D again, since we're in 2D. Okay, and when you do that, it comes up here and it shows you this. It looks like a basketball, tennis ball, whatever. Okay, but the bounciness is 0. So let me come here and change that 0. Well, we'll try 5 again. Okay, and that seems to be okay. Now then, let's go back to the ball, selecting that in hierarchy, and let's see where it will let us put this. Oh, let me rename this, by the way, while I'm here. Okay, I'm going to rename that to just be bouncy material. Okay, it's got a little better name to it now. All right, let's go back and see where we can get this. Now, we have 2 spots showing. Try one, okay? So I'm going to click and drag and see how it's showing me I can't drop it there, can't drop it there. Ooh, but I can drop it there. And I'm holding down my left mouse button, and I can drop it there, either one. So just pick one and we'll see how it does. Okay, so now then, the ball is covered in a bouncy material. So when I go back and play this, hey, it does. Only problem is, let's see when it comes, it doesn't bounce back to the paddle. We need that elasticity between the paddle and the ball. All right, so where am I going to get that? Well, first of all, let's stop. We're in scene. I'm going to go back to the paddle, and there was a hinge joint that I could add to this thing. Okay, well, it turns out there's another joint that I can add to it. Let's see, I'm closing up some of these just so I have some more room here to look. Okay, so I've got all those closed down. Now I can go back to add component, and this time I want a spring joint 2D. Now the way this works, I am starting with it on the paddle, and I can attach it from the paddle to the ball. So let's put in the new spring joint, okay? And right here it says, okay, I've got one, it's right there is where it's connected, okay? I may want to move that later, but if I do, that's my anchor points, and I'll come back in that in a minute. I want to get this hinge spring joint connected to the ball. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click and drag the ball. And again, it's showing me you can't put it here, you can't put it here. But on my spring joint, now see, be careful, this is opening these guys up as I go across them. Okay, I'm back into my spring joint, and it will let me put it there. Okay, now notice it has these tied together. There's still going to be a problem, but let me show you the problem, and then we'll come back and fix it. So I just clicked on play. It's avoiding the paddle. Okay, but notice that it is connected, but it's avoiding the paddle. Okay, so let's go back and look. There's a reason for that. Let me close some of these back down. Didn't mean for those to open up a while ago. Okay, spring joint. The spring joint looks at the distance between the two objects that you have connected and assumes that's as close as it can get to the object. When you have a spring and the spring pulls back, it still has a length to it. And so it's assuming that's the length of the spring when it's not stretched out. And so it's not going to let the ball get any closer to that point than that distance right there. So I want the spring to be able to pull all the way back. So that was the default distance. I'm going to put a 0 there. And when I click off of it, oh, no, went back there. I don't want that. Well, why does it keep doing that? Because auto configure distance is on. So turn off auto configure distance, okay? Then I'll come back and do a 0. When I click off, when I'm clicking off, I'm accidentally clicking here, which is filling in this box again. So let me try one more time. Turn off the auto configure, put in a 0, and then I'm just going to go click over here anywhere that's safe. And it won't quite let it touch, but close enough for it to work. Okay, so now that I've changed that up, let's go see what it looks like when we play this. Uh-oh, that ball is going right through the paddle again. We fixed that when we put in a 2D outline on this thing. And so we've got the rigid body on the paddle. We've got the box collider on the paddle. So what happened? Well, there's one more option right here that says this is a spring joint. Allow the two items that are joined together to collide. Okay, so once I added in the spring joint, there was another option that did away with the collision. So I've got to tell it, let it collide. So I'll come in here and run it again. Okay, now that little ball is really going fast. And notice it is connected to the paddle because it keeps pulling on the paddle. But it's going outside our ability to see. Let's see what happens when it gets in. Oh, see, hit the paddle again. Now, this is moving fast enough that sometimes the ball will appear to go right through the paddle again simply because it has made it from one side of the paddle to the other before Unity can detect they collided. So you, like just then it did it again. Anyway, but if you've ever played paddleball, this is about how fast it looks. So there is our simple simulation using Unity's built-in physics engine, along with some hinge joints, a spring joint, and we had to add in a texture, a skin on top of these things so they could collide, tell them they could collide, and tell the ball it was bouncy. And this will just run pretty much forever. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. And that is how you make a simple simulation of the paddle ball.